Hello, and welcome to the Argyle HR Leadership Forum, Empowering Workforce Resilience and Retention. My name is Michael with Argyle. It's great to have everyone joining us today. I have some important information to share with you, and then we'll turn the floor over to our esteemed opening keynote speaker. First, we'd like to take a moment to thank today's sponsors, Arena and Eightfold AI. Our sponsors are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. We also welcome you to stay socially connected during today's event. For those of you who are active on social media, please use the hashtag ArgyleDigital and follow us on X at Argyle Exec Forum. Also, be sure to subscribe to Argyle on YouTube for exclusive access to all our past events. Finally, and most importantly, we want to hear from you. So during each session, we encourage you to submit your questions and comments in the Q&A box on your screen. Following each presentation, we've set aside time for our speakers to weigh in on your questions. Thank you again for joining us today. Now let's get started. Without further delay, I'd like to introduce Adam Hickman, Vice President, Organizational and Employee Development with the Walt Disney Company Partners. We're excited to have Adam for his opening keynote presentation titled Building Resilient Organizations and Rethinking Retention in a New Era of Work. Adam, thank you so much for being here today. Welcome, and over to you.
Yeah, you got it. Thanks so much for having. Hello, everyone. I hope today the things that we get accomplished out of this is not just buzzwords, but it's for you to take back. I'll share a little bit about what we're doing on our side related to resilient workforces this year. And even through I dropped one Disney thing in here. So if you find it, comment in the chat. We'll see if you can find it. I'll give you a hint. It's on a screen somewhere. But just to jump right into it, we've got about 20 minutes that I'll get into the specifics. Would love to pause and hear any comments, questions you have along the way. I'm glad you mentioned social as well. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. Love to hear afterwards. What are you doing, or what questions or way in which that we're all in it for the same purpose and reason. So where can we get the most of that as well? So some buzzwords to start, because who doesn't love a little bit of that around? When I heard resilient or resilience, I always come back to, well, what do you mean by that? We get really hung up on the how. So we know the what. The what's the resilient. The how is where we're going to make the most out of this. And that's really what starts this point about, well, why now? Or what's caused that? And I thought if there's a way in which that we can start with that, what's the big picture, or what's the goal that we're after? I don't think anyone would disagree that we've got economic pressure that's against us in anything in the world of work, or when we're trying to attract or retain or sustain or even evolve to where you're at. How people experience the stability, compensation continues to be mixed. I always see job posting and boards where it's to me, it's more 60-40 now. People more put salaries out there. But let's be honest, being in HR, does anybody read the far left number? No, they go to the right number. So they assume starting point's that. So you've got the pressure of what that is. And then your long-term commitment employees is how are you keeping them? Sure, we do stay interviews. But again, that's the what. What do you do with that? That's the how. It's just how we take that data and turn it into something that is more than just words on a paper. We actually take actions on some of these themes that have emerged from it. Evolving expectations. I just was in a conversation this morning about somebody that we posted a role, that they've got the role, and now it's evolved even before they even began to do it. And so how do you keep perks of the role, but then also the job title aligned to the job? Hard to do. And then just the cultural pieces that are out there. I'll talk a little bit about our secret sauce to belonging and what we do, but it moves out of that nice to have, in my terms, on non-negotiable drivers to performance. If your culture is what you describe it when they apply, they've got to feel it and experience it the day they start. But think about that. Think of your first job to your career job that you're in. Your first job, you got a paycheck, you had a boss, you had start and end time. Now, if you compare it to your current work now, what would you say has changed culturally, not just there? Well, it's the experience that you've had through it. Those are the non-negotiable drivers that I'm talking about. So what I want to cover today in our time is really the drivers of workforce, and then what's the cultural flexibility and purpose. therein lies the difference of what that is. Because in the past, there's especially practitioners narrow in on these three specifics as silos. And never is there a harmony amongst the three. And how do you align your people strategy around with that shows that you actually care as a human? Not that you just wrote it or you said it, but you've got some authenticity in there that people can feel and experience that every single day. And I know that there's sometimes I'll get hit with the question like, well, does every day have to be your best day at work? It should be set up that way. Yeah. Marcus Buckingham's got a book coming out. It's phenomenal work related to how do you design love into the workplace. And usually has the reaction you probably chuckle when I said that as well. But it's unbelievable in the sense of if I asked you today about, what do you love doing every day? And we use that word interchangeably throughout because it's become very intentional. I'm like, wow, I love teaching my son how to drive a car right now. No, I don't, but I'll say that. Well, there's aspects of that have created that experience. So if you think of the things that you love to do, those are the experiences that you're creating for this resilient type of workplace that's very purposeful, that has flexibility, and that culturally is going to create the workplace that you are today. So to think through the key drivers around, well, what makes this resilience and retention this year specifically? Here's the things that we're paying close attention to. Not only why do they stay, but why do they leave? And everybody's got to McKinsey's got to report, Gallup's got to report, ATD. I mean, anybody. ChatGPT has its own report. I don't know where it comes from, but everybody's got their own point around. Is it just compensation? Well, here's the argument, right? And you pick up a dissertation or a DBA project, you're going to get varying opinions on this quick about, yes, they leave managers, not companies. I'm going to attribute that to Gallup. I had a great working relationship with them for years. So yes, that is true. However, it's not the only aspect of it. We know that the trigger point at the start is what's the compensation. This is where pay transparencies come in. So it's no longer just the compensation piece to it. Is if that fits my life, close attention to that word, life, not just work, not just career, but life, then what are the other accolades to come along with that will invite me to come and stay? This is where your culture comes in. So around belonging and recognition, I always say, if you can be seen, heard, and valued, we're doing really good in terms of belonging. Another argument you could say is, and you think of belonging is, no matter my entry point, and this could be laterally, this could be, really anything in the sense of where you start in the belonging. How do I ensure that I'm seen, heard, and valued? That's a top predictor of, do you have a belonging strategy in place? Now, recognition comes next to that. Not one and the same. Those are two. All the things around recognition we don't have to get into today, but I would say the single indicator on are we doing it right is, again, seen, heard, and valued, but individualized to the person. For instance, 10 years ago, I was the billboard guy, right? Like if something was great, I want to hear and see about it, the world to see about it. I don't care as much anymore, right? Give me the big milestones, the big wins. It's more about success of people and functions and teams than about me. I'm good. That only can come out in terms of a conversation with your manager, so on and so forth. So it's the intentional and individualized recognition that makes the biggest difference. Then we flip over to the flexibility autonomy. And I love this one because no one says they don't want autonomy. But what does that mean? That's the what. The how underneath the autonomy is, do you have the authority and expectation to do what's being asked? Really bad example. I'll give you one though. If I have the autonomy to grow long hair, I'm in trouble because I can't. So why in the world do we translate that into the workforce where we've given not the authority, we've given the expectation. They might not have the authority to do it, but you've got the autonomy to do what needs to be done. Or you've got the freedom, or I'll hear things like the door's always open. Well, there's not even a door in the office. How can you say the door's always open? So really autonomy boils down to that. You have the authority and the expectation. Then the flexibility comes across as you're fixed in the destination. You know what success looks like, but you got to be flexible in how they get there. The how piece is individualized by strengths. You know where they're strong, right? But a great exercise we don't have time to is write with your dominant hand your name 3 times, write with your non-dominant. What's the short and the difference of it? Well, it was painful on the non-dominant because that's not a talent. So in the flexibility aspect to that is be fixed in the definition, but open and trust the talents of those of how they get to that piece, right? With the authority and the expectation. And then the one that we know to be true constantly in HR is growth and development. It's a clear career path in the role and the development of the employee. And hey, if you want a bonus prize, as the person as well, right? Because now that's a different reason why I want to stay. I'm not only getting developed as a person, as an employee, but I can see how this transfers and translates out as well. Where's this gap that happens the most is here. This is what most organizations are missing. And I say this not specific to any industry, but if you look thematically across any of the most recent research in the last 3 years, we're getting it wrong in a lot of areas. If you have more of a reactive model, it's sometimes I'll equate it to, it's like calling the police. They show up after the crime. The proactive part is all of the things be true for an HR function because you're an anticipator of what's coming. You can see the action before it happens, right? You've built the partnerships and you don't have a seat at the table, so to speak, as you've been invited to it because they've seen the currency you've built with them. If we don't get it right, excuse me, the scarier number here is on the right, 200% replacement cost, annual salary. Just do the math on that and run it for 10 employees, see what you get. So what I'm saying is the North Star to this is really that proactive model. If you have an HR strategy in place that is surrounded by this resiliency piece, but really is people focused and oriented to where it's at. Let's go a little bit further into this piece. I want to give you a couple of different visuals for what this is. If you think in terms of a model, this is how I head wraps around this thing. It's like, well, what are we really doing here? If we're in a room with the executive team, and what a great activity to run is to throw this up on the wall and just say, what do we do today that builds these pieces? So, the fun term around psychological safety and inclusion. Now, ideally, inclusion happens pre and post hire, right? You've articulated what it's like to be included at this role. When they've got here, you've individualized to them and you've included them to the part of the culture where they're at. The safety aspect to it, and I don't know if we always need to use the word psychological, but it's a fun word we throw in there. It's, am I who I am when I started? And can I continue to be who I am now that I'm here? That safety invites thoughts, opinions, backgrounds, experiences, all of that to say, yeah, bring it. So here's a great example. How many of you know that person that just can't stop talking? I don't see that as a problem. I welcome it. Be that person. Let me find the right fit for you culturally in our organization that we can maximize it every day and never stop. The worst day for them is we stick them behind a screen with an Excel sheet and say, best of luck. But you've got to find some way in which that safety is that part, and it's included. Flexibility we talked about. The purpose then is in the meaningful work. We're really heavy right now on mission and performance. If you're strived against the mission of what we do and why we do it, the performance follows it. Now, aligning those two is where the hard work's at. That's the how aspect to it. But do a pulse check. If you asked, yourself and others, what's the mission of your company and how does your performance impact that? That starts to give you an idea and an unwinding of, well, how well are we doing this today? Let's go back to the three pieces I keep coming to. The foundation of this is that seen, heard, and value. I've given you that idea. Here's another really great activity for you to run. If you charted these up, how are our employees seen? How are they heard and how are they valued? I've given you some keys here on, the perception piece of being seen. And this is not just on the website. This is throughout the year. Where's our work being seen actually? A really example of this, go on LinkedIn under Patty Poppy. She's the CEO of Pacific Gas and Electric. You'll see she's constantly in the field with her employees. She's got a whole segment around all this part of being seen and stopping with it for Josh tomorrow. A great example of us at Disney being all throughout the parks of being seen. Just carry it through all the way on that visual perception piece to it. The heard part is that auditory reception about information. What are your listening posts that you have stood up today? Often we'll say, skip levels is great. I think skip levels are great. They're also archaic. We've been doing them for a long time. it's not less, don't pull them back in senses we shouldn't do anymore, but what are you doing with the information that you're getting? Do you have other avenues in which that they can, employees can be heard? Is that's through surveys, that's through social media, that's through Slack if you use Slack. I mean, just think of the other ways other than just skip levels that you can see that people are being heard. Then the value piece, and again, right back to that dialing into the individualization piece of it as well. The flexibility piece of that actually does come to head. It looks like this and that works, is when you stop going this path of output over hours management. Yes, at some point in the era of work, that was a way in which that it was managed. I think if you dial back into post World War II days is really when performance management came to head on certain things. And so the optics of, if I see people working, they must be working, so there must be an output. But I'm sure some of you can feel this sentence on, you can do more in the amount of time than others can because you're laser focused on certain things and you're not focused more on the hours. For instance, when you're in the zone and you're jamming, so do I speak, well, you can get quite a bit accomplished. Now, traditionally, if we map that against some sort of performance management hour schedule, maybe you got it done in a shorter amount of time. Now, what a beautiful thing when you can push that together and you can see how if we stop this output over hours management concept, it changes the landscape of work and how it's done. The flexible career pathways we talked already a little bit about, and then that last piece around manager enablement. Enablement is such a key word these days anymore. If you look at just the true meaning of it, I'm sure you can Google that and so on and so forth. But the enablement's the harder part of how do you manage in the world that we're in anymore. Yes, hybrid, and it's been around, right? But let me be also the guy to say remote and hybrid work has been in existence for a while. I think 1985 was the first employee through NASA, Jack Mills is his name, that coined this thing, so it's his fault. But if you think of people like garbage collectors, I always say Safe Light Auto, the window replacements, they meet the requirements for flexible and or remote work. They're not in a location around their boss. This isn't new. Yes, it's new in terms of widespread of how it took place, but the enablement piece around this will help you get to that resiliency where you're at. When you start to connect this, I'm going to give you one more construct to look at, and then we'll pause here for questions. But when you do this to the purpose and you connect it down to the downlines of those that are involved, this is the way I think about this, is how do we connect this to the mission, right? How do you articulate that? How do you cascade it in teams? Here comes the enablement piece. If I dropped in a 1.5 here, it would be the enablement to the manager of the teams, because that's the point. Those teams then move it to their individuals, and it's reinforced and recognized by the cultural norms that you have in place. So for instance, one that we use at Partners, we've got a CEO hosts a huddle every month. Our CEO comes on board, talks about all the initiatives and things we're doing, does recognition, but it's circling back to what we're trying to instill within the mission and purpose of what's in existence. That cascades through teams, through individuals. There's just a constant loop and a cycle to what that is. When you've got to that, I'll give you this last piece here. This really ties a bow on the whole thing. So if you're starting at that bottom piece, which is the inclusive behaviors, and the enablement, the psychological safety, the competencies, all that things at the bottom, you move up a rung. So how does that affect our culture? Then those three pieces piled on top really should give you a healthy understanding and model to look at internally. How are we doing, right? Best in class would be, hey, let's take a survey beside each one of these and get an understanding of where we are baseline. In those that are in your HR function that are more of the organizational development roles, more of the HRBP roles, they can start to fill in to say, well, what do we need to do to get to that point? But you got to start at that bottom rung. And when I mean leadership, that's all aspects. That's managers, supervisors, direct, anything that fits that rung. If you're a people leader, maybe it's more I should have put here as people leader, that is what owns the resiliency of when you get this put into action. Okay, I'm going to pause this there and see what questions we've got coming in.
Excellent. Thank you, Adam. It's a wonderful presentation. And as a quick reminder, audience members can still enter questions, and we're not going to review some of the questions that came through. Okay, so our first question, when companies talk about resilience today, what does that actually look like in the day-to-day employee experience, not just in the leadership messaging?
Yeah, great question. I the short the best answer in HR is it depends, right? So not that I want to say it depends, but it depends on how you define resiliency in your organization. If you haven't started there, that's got to be the starting point of how we're going to experience it. Too often do those take the advice of, hey, we're going to run with this definition because I think that fits us. That's a miss. You really got to have, I'll call tone at the top, correctly aligned with what resiliency means there before you even think to turn and discuss it elsewhere. So, starting point, if you've got it defined there, then really that chart I just shared with you starts to fall into place on how do we actualize this within our organization, and then how do you execute against what that is.
Excellent. Thank you. Moving on to the next question. A lot of companies are rethinking retention and strategies right now. In your experience, what's one thing organizations still get wrong when they try to keep their best people?
Yeah, still get wrong. Still get wrong is the key word there, which means they've always got it wrong. I don't know. They've always got it wrong. I think a miss has been, well, two things. One, this is how we've always done it. I mean, it drives me nuts. And I'm a geriatric millennial, I think is the correct terminology for me. That sets me off to start like, well, this is how we've always done it. I'm like, well, then, why am I here? Why did you hire me? Right? Why are we not opening the door up to see what else is possible? So the retention strategies up front is uh, being open to other ways, but then also if you've done your stay interviews and your exit interviews, there is a thematic way that you can go to understand what are we missing in terms of what keeps us here. Sometimes individuals stay because of brand association. Sometimes they don't. But listening and queuing in on what those are and your listening posts related to that will give you enough to know where and what you need to go explore further into this. And especially in terms of surveys, it's not about the number. I know people might disagree with me. It's more of the exploration of what caused the number. Do you do things? If you're just focused on the number, you've missed the point of trying to understand the retention aspect of it. But when you will see spikes in the declines in terms of your culture and your engagement, there's intentional pieces around how to do that. Here's a really good thing to take a peek at. If you've not looked at a software called N8N.io, you should. It is an amazing AI tool that you can overlay so many different HR systems that will give you an indicator and even a forecast on things related to retention strategies based on your own data, to where you wouldn't have to focus on what's wrong. You need to focus on what is doing things right and tune that up louder.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, do you see the role of HR shifting from managing employee programs to shaping the entire employee ecosystem, like culture, skills, leadership, and purpose?
Yes. Uh, I mean, I could just say, yes, they should be. I mean, that the short of it is HR, and sometimes I remind people, these are humans that are resources for you, but they're accelerators to all things you just mentioned: culture, skills, leadership, purpose. Yeah, all of those involve the people, not the widgets, not the product. It's the people. And so the programs that would follow that employee life cycle all have attributes tied to what that is. For instance, do a search on employee value propositions. Hopefully your company's got one. If not, what a great tool to come out with after this. Uh, if you look at the employee value proposition, that is an HR driven tactic with all parties involved, but answers exactly the culture, skills, and leadership. It is a good snapshot into what's it like to work here and what's the experience. It's not just the traditional sense of like how work gets done. Work gets done, great, but tell me the value in which how work's good. That's the other layering behind what this is. So yes, they should. And if you're looking for a great way to kick that open, an employee value proposition, getting stood up or amplifying is a great tactic for it.
Thank you. That's excellent insight. And so, our final question, looking ahead, do you think the companies that retain the best talent or retain the talent the best way will be the ones either offering compensation or the ones that create stronger meaning, growth, adaptability in the employee experience.
So couple questions in there. One around offer better compensation. I don't know if any HR function I've been a part of, if we ask a question about compensation, does anybody ever come back and say, I'm paid fair. I'm just good, right? Don't touch anything. Of course, people are going to ask for more. So why ask that question? Well, what you're really, in my mind, we're listening for in that type of understanding is more, are you fairly and accurately paid to market? Do you understand our compensation philosophy? And is there transparency in the process? If you've done that right, you've done the business right in a sense. Not everybody is going to fall into line on, I am paid at 100% of what I should be paid at, and don't you dare pay me anymore. It's more, do you understand the philosophy, and can you see the path forward and how to get to that there is a better compensation if that's your goal? Where I've seen that fall apart is job architects are just disastrous. There's no career pathing. There's no compensation transparency. Your frontline managers are your key indicators on, can they explain pay compensation philosophy here or not? When you could do those things, I don't want to say it disappears because it doesn't, but you're doing right by the role that you should be doing in sense of what it means to be in the compensation business of things. The stronger meaning and growth, adaptability points, that all packs into that EVP piece to it. Meaning and growth is mission and purpose. If it's rooted in their job and who they are and what they're doing, then it's really back to HR and how do you grow that person in that role. The adaptability and the employee experience, if you've got a defined employee experience, you'll see and be able to put sunlight to where is it adaptable and where it's not. So for instance, if I'm a risk management person, but now I want to be a CFO, we're not saying it's impossible. It's going to be hard to adapt through that because there are some career right-hand turns we got to make and credentials required to cross over to that, which is fine because our job is not to make it happen. Our job is to make it visible and what's the path forward and what that is.
Thank you. Well, Adam, that's all the time we have for today. So thank you for being here. An excellent keynote and Q&A. I also want to thank everyone else for joining us today. Now, this session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. Our next session will begin at 11:35 a.m. Eastern Time, which will be a panel discussion titled Culture plus Data plus Development equals the New Equation for Workforce Retention. Please remain on the stage, and the next session will begin automatically. We look forward to seeing you there. Adam, thank you so much.
You're welcome.